this week. Hope you all have collected your bags, or if not, you'll probably do so later. The wait is not too long today, so it's quite a good time to be here. And again, today we have Dr. Dinesh who will be here talking about how to catch a heart attack before it actually comes. Which is why we chose donuts today, so in case you have any condition later, doctor's in the house literally, so don't feel free to take more. At least today you'll be safe if there's anything that happens. But obviously, Dr. Dinesh has been around sport for a long time. He's actually heads the Football Association of Singapore's medical committee for the last 7 years. So without further ado, I'll invite Doctor up, and we'll have about a 45-minute lecture, and then maybe after that we'll have some Q&A.
Thank you for the kind introduction. I'd like to thank all the organizers. There's a few organizers involved as well in putting this thing together, and all of you for coming down. It's not easy to sit and listen to a talk about heart problems on an afternoon, and if you've had your fill of donuts, you'll find your sugar levels going up and falling asleep. So I'm going to try my best to keep you awake. We actually have people circulating. If anyone falls asleep, they're going to wake you up rather suddenly. Believe me. No, not me. So we've chosen this topic today. Is there a bit of a boom at the back? Can everyone hear me? Is that good? Yeah? Okay, so we've chosen this topic today because it's about running. So all of you, to some degree, are involved with running, I believe, or want to be, or have been. And later on, you're going to have a nice little talk by a very famous runner from Singapore. So before that, we're going to tell you what you need to do to make sure your heart's healthy and safe. So we picked a runner's life because I guess you're runners. And a runner's life is as important as anyone else's. But what you may not realize is that runners are at increased risk sometimes of having heart issues as well. So I'll show you something later on. Some of the data points towards slightly increased risk when you run, but overall a reduction in risk because you run. So you increase that risk for that short period when you run, and then it drops over time because you run. You train yourself to overcome things. You can overcome things such as blockages in your heart arteries. They don't go away when you run. What you do is you build a capacity to compensate for it. So a lot of people think that, okay, I've been unhealthy for the last 10, 20 years, I take up running now, and if I do that, all my blocks will go away and I'll be fine. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. And I'll tell you that a little bit more about that later on as well. And what we want to do is try to catch a heart attack before it catches you, but even try to catch small blockages if we can before it catches you. Try to catch other heart things. Many people don't necessarily have blockages in their heart arteries. They have other heart problems, other medical problems, and it's a general checkup. Once a year, once every 2 years, depending upon your age, will reduce that risk as well. Okay, so the topic here is a runner's life, how to catch a heart attack before it catches you. And of course, I'm a bit partial. I'm a cardiologist. I work out at 2 hospitals, Mount Elizabeth, Orchard, and Novena. And I'm a little bit partial. I always think the heart's the most important organ, because that's the one that I work on. Okay, so I'd like you all to just indulge me, and just put your fist up like this if you could, in front of you. That's the size of your heart. Some of you got very small hearts. Please don't be jealous of your neighbors, okay? They got bigger hearts. Wow, I knew something was going to happen. I can almost feel it happening on this. Is there still a bit of a screech in the back? No? We're good, yeah? Okay. So this is the size of your heart. It sits in your chest like this. Palms away. Everything starts and stops with your heart. Life itself. So you've heard of people whose hearts have stopped or been brought back, right? Because this is where it all starts and stops. So I'm a bit partial. I like to think that if you keep your heart healthy, you keep everything else healthy as well. So, how to catch a heart attack. We're going to show you a few little things. Nothing too spectacular. But the first thing, actually you can't see now. Can you see from here? Okay. So you see this guy over here? He was 35. It doesn't show on this. Okay, no luck. Okay, so much for that, it doesn't show. He's 35 years old, to the right side of the picture, okay, when he had his first heart attack. You may think that's a bit young. We have a whole load of people, okay, who are in their 20s. I do calls for government hospitals to come in with heart attacks too. So when do you need to start looking at these things? I tell people that once you're in your teens, get your cholesterol checked to know if you've got a predisposing factor, such as high cholesterol. So this guy there is a 35-year-old guy who we saved. Okay? And what you see over there is me and my dad. So we're two generations of the same cardiologists, okay, working in that business. So I can't point anymore on these. So, can't hear? Can you hear now? Okay, there seems to be something wrong with the audio. So, I mentioned earlier that you can get issues, whatever age you are. Why should we be concerned? Because sudden death can occur to anybody, anywhere, anytime. Okay? You don't have to be running. I mentioned earlier that while you're running, the risk goes up a little bit. Because you run, your risk comes down. You've heard of all these stories of people going out, they're running all the time. How come they've come out with an adverse event? How come some of them have passed away? Many people can be brought back when they have a heart attack or when the heart stops. But very often, most people don't make it to the hospital. So, the data from Singapore is that 1 to 2 Singaporeans, this is data from 2004, we got our volume back again. 2004, 1 to 2 Singaporeans, okay, under the age of 60, die from a cardiac arrest. This is now 2017, so you would think that with medical technology and everything else, the numbers would reduce by now. Okay, oh, that's a lot better. Okay.
Sorry about it.
Okay, could you hear me earlier on in the back? Okay, so now my voice is not screeching as well. Okay, so we noticed the data from 2004. Recently, it's gone up to 3. You may say that's because our population has grown, and it has. Okay, the population has grown significantly as well. But you would think, with medical technology, we'd be able to reduce that. So up to 3, okay? And half of these deaths occurred in people under the age of 60. We know that for a fact. The median age is 50, you look to the back, 47, and a lot of them are in their 30s and 40s. Okay? Now that's not talking about those who are 60, 70, 80 years of age. I'm going to show you pictures of people who are 70 or 80 years of age who are still running as well. And the reason they're alive and the reason they're well is because they're running at that age. So it's good to start early. Okay? And many of these are athletes. What is sudden cardiac death? Sudden cardiac death occurs without warning after several minutes of loss of consciousness. You've all heard about this. We need to prevent things like this from happening. But that is the end result of something else. A block in the heart arteries, a congenital problem with your heart, and even other things with the lungs. Everything starts and stops with the heart. Can you hear me much clearer in the back now, right? Okay, good. So, how many of you remember Dola Kasim? How many of you are Singaporeans here? Quite a few. You remember Dola? Yeah, okay. Collapsing, Gile King, the guy who could play football very well in his day. He didn't have checkups done. At the age of 59, he passed away. So we were looking after him. I actually had to do a press conference for him. That was about, when was that? That was 2008 or 2009. That was quite some time ago. Okay? His heart stopped for 15 minutes. You know what's changed since then? Because of that, they didn't have defibrillator machines in the stadiums at that time. And after that, we put things in place such that we had defibrillator machines. This is how I kind of got involved with football and FAS as well, after being his doctor at that time. Okay, but his heart had stopped for 15 to 18 minutes. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that as well. But it's not just people in their 50s. You always think it's people in their 50s. Young football players, 17-year-old guy. He had abnormalities on his ECG that contributed to an abnormal heart rhythm. These were not detected early enough as well. We have the recent run, where we had a 29-year-old man who was very fit, who passed away as well. Now, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to make sure you just check things before you go ahead and do a full marathon, okay? 29-year-old man, and we found out later on that he had heart issues, okay? 37-year-old guy in the English newspaper, The Sun. Many examples like this. 59-year-old man who did really well, and near the end, near the finish line is where he collapsed. And he was brought back to life. Remember I mentioned to you that you can resuscitate people? This guy was brought back to life. Okay, so I'm only showing you cases or examples where they've consented to us presenting these things. There's a whole lot of my other patients, okay, who were in similar situations too. And then of course, young people, 17-year-old lad, training for the Sea Games. This is many years ago. And there's been more recent ones as well, with younger people in their mid-teens. Okay, so why do runners collapse? Many reasons altogether. From a study in 2011, it is always good to go back to science to get examples or proof of why these things happen. Heat stroke, you know how to prevent that. Hyponatremia just means you've got low sodium. It's pretty much the same as the first example as well. Many people, when they run, they drink lots and lots of water, but what they forget to do is they forget to take electrolytes with it as well. And you start getting all your salts dropping. Replacing water alone is not enough. Okay? The third thing there, postural hypotension. Do you know what that means? Your blood pressure drops. If you remember, when you run, you're supposed to warm up, do your race, and then you're supposed to cool down. Right? Any issues? Okay. You're supposed to cool down. Okay? So during the cooling down phase, if you don't do that, let's say you go out and do a run and then you suddenly stop. Your heart's pumping away, your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up, and you suddenly just stop and decide not to cool down. What happens is blood pools in your legs, the pressure goes down, and this is where a lot of people faint at the end of their run. So you've got to remember, no matter how tired you are, to keep moving. And if you can't move and you're standing up, you might want to lie down. Okay, because when you finish a marathon race, and if you're unable to walk, you don't want to be trying to stand, because your blood pressure pools and everything drops and you can faint. You might think this is a not so serious an issue, but many people have gotten injured and had major consequences as a result. And then of course, heart conditions. Of course there are lung conditions, brain conditions, all kinds of other things. But the main reason is often your heart. Okay? So once again, I'm going to ask you to look at that fist in your hand. Okay? And that's the size of your heart, pumping away. Arteries sit on top of it, like this. If I could use a pointer, it'd be great, but unfortunately I can't. Okay, so arteries sit on top of it like this. And these arteries pump blood to the heart. The big artery going up the center here pumps blood out. There are branches everywhere. So blood flow to the brain, blood flow downstream. If you get blocks anywhere in these, or an obstruction of the flow to that area goes down. So people get heart attacks. People also get brain attacks and stroke. People get blockages in their legs, where they need to have their legs, operated on or amputated. They're all the same thing. And it all comes out of that thing on the left, where cholesterol builds up. Cholesterol is not the only cause of heart problems, but it is the most reversible. So many people tell me, but doc, I don't have very high cholesterol, I've got mild cholesterol. My buddy over there, his cholesterol is higher. How come I got the heart attack? That's because all the other factors come together, which include genetic factors, stress. Stress causes cholesterol plaque that builds up in the inside of the arteries to rupture. Rupture like it does on the right-hand side of that picture earlier on, and occlude or block off the whole artery. Can you see that? What happens here is you get the cholesterol plaque, it ruptures. It's like a volcano rupture. Opens up, spews all that stuff forward, and closes off. So this is what happens. And if you're dehydrated, the chances of clot forming inside the artery are higher. So that's why you need to maintain your hydration status, but remember to take electrolyte drinks when you run as well. Okay? And this is what a heart attack looks like, because what happens is you get lack of blood supply to the heart muscle, and the lack of oxygen that comes from that, okay, is how a heart attack occurs. If it's prolonged, if the blockage is prolonged, you don't get oxygen, the muscle doesn't survive. Sometimes when you get blocks that are 90%, you get chronic lack of oxygen going down, and eventually that muscle also starts to have problems. Okay, so you understand the mechanisms behind it. We know all this, everybody knows this, right? Smoking is the worst thing you can do. Diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, and you'll find that most people tick a box or a few. All these things add up, and a 1 plus 1 doesn't become a 2. 1 plus 1 sometimes is a 3 or 4 or 5. Okay? Stress, genetics, if you have a family history of heart disease, you would know that you would be at higher risk as well. Anyone here know what obstructive sleep apnea is? Yeah, I'm sure a few you do. You know, when I'd say if we polled the people here, 20 to 30% of you snore. Okay? Snoring is because there's an obstruction to the airway going down. Because your air pipe is blocked to some degree. Most of it's because people are overweight, they have a thick neck. Bodybuilders who are big muscular guys, they tend to have so much muscle, it obstructs the airway. If you have lack of air going down towards your lung, what you do is you put your heart under strain. So many people don't realize this, but obstructive sleep apnea is obstruction of the airway going down, puts your heart under a tremendous amount of strain, and is a very significant cause of sudden cardiac arrest, sudden cardiac death. So those of you who snore, you might want to get it looked into by a doctor at some point as well. Genetic factors play a part. Indians have 3 times higher risk compared to Chinese, straight away. And it's not just because of our diet in this generation, okay? It's several generations of the same doing that stuff, okay? So genetic factors also play a part. So what can we do? Screen early. I tell people, if you've got kids, teenagers, send them for a blood test in their mid-teens. If you know the cholesterol's high, they've got a predisposition, they can change their lifestyle. They don't need to go on tablets. Okay? Mid-20s is another good milestone. Check your cholesterol once again. If your cholesterol's high, you know you need to make changes. Some people have something called a familial hypercholesterolemia, or it's in your genes. You've inherited a gene, or there's a little switch that's gone on in your body. Okay? You hear me okay in the back, right? Switch that's gone on in the body. Okay? That just produces loads of cholesterol. You could be the fittest guy. I've got guys who run marathons who are carrying less than 10% body fat with cholesterol through the roof. And they never checked it because they think they're really fit. And they think that because they exercise, they should be okay. And as a result, they don't check. Okay? So this is why I tell you, that's the first thing you need to do. Early health screening with a cardiac emphasis. As I mentioned earlier, everything starts and stops with the heart. Okay? You want to make sure your ticker's okay. Otherwise, you're in big trouble. And you know, many people tell me, oh, but I don't care, I'm 70 years old, I'll just die, I don't mind. It doesn't work that way. What happens is you usually survive it, and then your heart's really weak. Okay? So it is worth looking into, whatever age you're at. I get these statements from my patients quite often. Okay? It is very important. Our lifespan these days is 90 plus to 100 if we look after ourselves well. And 100 years of good life too. Medication is needed, as recommended by a cardiologist or another doctor. Believe me, no one will put you on a tablet unless they felt it was going to benefit you. And then if we've got blocks, we can fix them. You live in a great day and age now. We've got so much medical innovation. If we have blocks, we can close them. Okay? If we have blocks, we can open them. So I keep telling everybody, I'm a plumber. Okay? If it's open, I close it. If it's closed, I open it, depending on what we need to do. You know, people have holes in the heart. We close them. We can do all these things through small little incisions. Okay, so you live in a great day and age with great technology. Okay, and the last thing I put down at the back, for all of you, especially if you're runners, learn CPR. We talk about people having a buddy system when they run. It's a good idea when you train and you're not accustomed to it, but when you're running and doing your race. And if something happens, if you're there as a bystander and you can do CPR, you can save someone's life. Lifestyle changes, you all know this. Eat right, be healthy, eat the right food, be active, exercise as much as you can. We say 30 to 45 minutes every day. Nobody can do it every day, but most days of the week. Okay? Lower stress levels, all stuff that you know. Exercise has a beneficial effect on your cholesterol. As I mentioned earlier, it doesn't remove blocks, but it prevents them getting bigger. Okay? It at least reduces your risk overall. And exercise for at least 30 minutes a day. Okay? Alright? You know what this is? Good food, bad food. You all know this anyway. Nobody needs to tell you what's good food, what's bad food. Okay? If it tastes really good, it's usually bad for you. Okay? If it tastes really bad, the chances are it's probably good for you too. Okay? So everything in moderation. And these are the things you need to do. Balance your inputs, exercise, relax. Your doctor's your friend, don't worry, okay? And the healthy plate. More vegetables, less fat. And actually it's a very simple thing. Less fat, less sugar. Very easy. Reduce that as much as you can, and life is good, okay? We all know about this thing, right? So when you do the right things, your good cholesterol, which protects you, goes up, and the bad cholesterol comes down. Everyone's heard this by now, over and over again. These are values that I put up here, because a lot of the time people ask me, you should take a picture of this, what the good values are. Okay, if you follow Singapore guidelines, most of you would pass. But the truth of the matter is, the real level of bad cholesterol, okay, that we should be having circulating in our body is 1/3 of what we think is the norm. You don't need that bad cholesterol. Studies have been done in people who can't produce that bad cholesterol because they've got a genetic defect, and I'll show it to you. It's a good genetic defect to have. Those populations have almost no heart disease. So cholesterol, the bad cholesterol especially, is bad for you, contrary to what you might be reading on the net. Because there's a lot of stuff out there on the net saying, oh, cholesterol is no longer the big culprit, it's inflammation, it's everything else. It's actually everything. But cholesterol is the biggest player of the lot. All the studies have confirmed it. And animals and children run with an LDL level. If you know what your LDL, the bad cholesterol level is, of less than 50. If you look at the Singapore guidelines, I'll tell you to try and keep it below 130. Most of my patients coming in with heart attacks have LDLs thereabout at about 130, 140, sometimes 120. Some are super high, 200 for the bad cholesterol. So that's a number you might want to remember, okay? So total cholesterol less than 200. LDL, that's the guideline that they put in there. But in truth, this is the true norm. This is what kids have. This is what all the animals out there, the mammals, have as well. Okay? And I mentioned this, that there's certain genetic groups with very low risk of heart disease. There's a tribe in the Amazon who lead life the way we were supposed to lead it. Without cars, without all kinds of other stuff, full activity, eating healthy food. These guys have the lowest risk of heart disease. Okay? The Semane tribe. Okay? They're horticulturalists. Right? It's a population. And then, we've also studied another population who have a genetic defect where they cannot produce the bad cholesterol. In that population, there's almost zero heart disease. The LDL, or the bad cholesterol that I mentioned to you earlier on. And when we studied these populations, we found out that they had a gene that wasn't switched on. That gene, okay, is called PCSK9. You tend to give these genes funny names. So there's a new drug that inhibits that gene that has just been launched recently in Singapore in the last 1 or 2 months that can drop your cholesterol 70%. But with everything, there's always a downside. It's very expensive, as always. It's administered as an injection, okay, twice a month. So every 2 weeks you got to inject yourself. But I've tried it myself, okay, just to see what the injection's like. It doesn't really hurt very much, but it's a bit of a pain in the ass, okay, to have to inject yourself. But some people prefer that to taking a tablet. So this is an alternative that drops your cholesterol super low by targeting that gene. Somehow we're next to slide. So this is how the injection's done. Just to let you know, okay, it's a new thing. It costs $650 an injection. Insurance companies hardly ever pay for this kind of stuff. Okay, but it's just something for you to know. In time, the cost will probably drop. Okay, so what does cardiac screening involve? What do you need to do? What do you need to know? Okay, if we scan the age groups here, I think we've got a 20-something to maybe 60-plus age group, okay? Looking around us here, okay? I'll call the 70-year-old 60 as well for now, okay? But 60 is a good age. 60 is the new 40, you know? And 80 is the new 60, so don't worry. What does cardiac screening involve? Depending on your risk factors, the number of things you need to do tends to increase. The younger you are, the more of a compensatory mechanism you have within your body. The less things you need to do. Up to the age of 20 plus, you probably just need to test your cholesterol. That's all you need to do. But you need to see the right person to get it done. Go and see the right doctor, get the right tests, have yourself examined properly as well. There are a number of tests that we can do, from the left to the right, basic ECG. I have so many patients that come and ask me, you know, like, oh, but I've done an ECG, so that means I have no blocks, I have nothing wrong with me. That is one test that maps the electrical activity of the heart. That doesn't tell you you're okay. But if you take a health screening form, sometimes they say complete assessment, including full assessment, including ECG. And everyone thinks that because of that, there's nothing wrong with their hearts. That's not necessarily true. So you need to see the right person who can interpret that, plus the physical findings and your history. Your story, basically, as to what kind of symptoms you have, what your parents had, what your siblings have, and put that all together, get a composite picture, and make an assessment. Okay? Echo in the middle is an ultrasound scan of your heart. There's x-rays, there's a treadmill stress test, and if you need to, a test where you pass a catheter in and look for blocks. And I'll talk to you about that in a short while. So the ECG is basically an electrical map of the heart. You stick a whole load of electrodes, bear with me. You stick a whole load of electrodes and map out the activity of your heart. If you're having a massive heart attack, it can tell you that, but sometimes it misses it too. So I do calls for some of the government hospitals, where I go in the middle of the night, based on patients coming in with chest pain and an abnormal ECG. We go in and we open up the arteries for them, okay? But it doesn't always show in an ECG. So you have other tests that you may need to do. Okay? A treadmill stress test. Very good test, but if you look in there, it says accuracy 70%. That means 30% of the time, it doesn't get the right diagnosis. 30% of the time, it's missed. And this is good for big blocks. You can't find small blocks. So I have many people who come in and say, I've got a treadmill stress test that's normal. And I've done a CT scan, I've got a whole load of 50% blocks. 50% blocks don't show up on a treadmill stress test because all it is a map of the heart looking at flow through the artery. Okay? So it doesn't mean you don't have early blocks when you've got a normal treadmill. But it tells you that your risk of having a massive heart attack is less than 1%. That's the good news, okay? And this is from 2008. It says, could cardio tests have prevented unexpected deaths? The reason I put this up is that after 2008 and 2009, after the Dola Qasim issue, after a few other things, the Army started doing more detailed tests. Those of you who did Army, I did my Army in the 1980s, okay? It's quite a while back. Back then, all they asked you to do was turn to your left and cough, okay? A lot of you have been to the Army here in Singapore, okay? Those who are foreign, you know what it's about as well. Now, they do ECG tests. If the ECG is abnormal, they send you to the National Heart Center to have an ultrasound scan of your heart, okay? And the reason is, all the data points towards checking early. This is a slide from Italy, okay? It showed unscreened athletes, okay, and screened athletes. And in the screened athletes group, you see a big drop in the number of people who've collapsed. This is done in Italy, it's a big study. So then they rolled it out throughout the population, and it probably added to them having a financial crisis throughout the country because you're required to screen a whole load of athletes as well. But if you take the cost aside, screening athletes before they do tests reduces the risk of them collapsing, reduces the risk of them having heart problems. And this is why also now in the Army we do this. In the FAS, which I'm involved with, we screen all the professional players. Anyone in any of the national teams gets extensive medical screening before we send them out, because they're partaking in really intense physical activity. Same as if you run a marathon. Marathons are considered intensive physical activity or runs. I mean, some of you may not be doing the full marathon, half marathon, 10 kilometers, but it's a race. And you need to make sure that you're able to do it. But this is what it shows, okay? And thankfully, if we find there's some abnormalities, we live in the right day and age. This is actually from 2005, I think, yep, up there, September 2005. That was when we first started getting CT scans out. The big multi-slice CT scans. I've had a CT scan last year because of my age. You might believe it, okay? But I mean, we're all, I'm close to 50 now, okay, age-wise. So your risk goes up. So if that happens, you need to find out if your risk is significant enough. And sometimes the only way to do that is to do a detailed test. So there's CT scans. If your risk is high, we do CT scans for some of our patients. If your treadmill's abnormal, if you've got a very strong family history, if you've got super high cholesterol, what we do is we take a number of boxes, put it together, and if your risk profile is such, sometimes a simple test like a CT scan of your heart arteries can tell you you've got a block. And then you can go on the appropriate medication. That doesn't mean your life changes. If you don't need balloons and stents, which I'll show you later on, sometimes what we do is we just put people on medication, they go on as per usual. Okay, so CT scans. This guy here
He's 50 years old. So at the age of 50, they gave him a free CT scan. Look at him, he looks pretty fit, no? He runs marathons and everything else. This, I can't point it to you, this is the block. Can you see a little line here and a break? That is a block in his heart artery. It was found, it was stented, he went on running marathons after that. It's from Time magazine. Okay? So what do we do when you see someone like me? Or you see someone else perhaps, okay? We do ultrasound scans. We do the non-invasive stuff first. We scan the heart arteries, you know, with CT scans, but first we do stuff that doesn't have any radiation. Ultrasound scan of the heart, looking at the pump function of the heart. We can scan the neck arteries. Your neck arteries, I told you earlier on that all the pipes are connected and you've got this pump going up towards your head. Your neck artery is the first place that you get cholesterol buildup on the inside of the artery, up here. This is flow going through, okay? And if you've got a block, I'll show you what a block looks like later on. The likelihood is if you've got a block up here, you've got blocks in other places. It's like in your house, all the pipes are connected. Yeah? Okay? And then we look at the pump function of the heart. So this is what a heart looks like when you slice through it. A normal heart on the left, and a heart with thick heart muscles on the right. Some people are born with certain congenital abnormalities, or they develop it over time, but the heart muscle gets thick. The heart muscle gets thick when you've got high blood pressure, and you don't control it. Because it's like your heart's beating against this high pressure. It's like it's doing weights, so it's training itself, and it gets muscle bound. When it gets muscle bound, it doesn't function properly. And that's when people start getting other problems. So a hypertrophied heart, a thickened heart muscle, you've all heard about this at some point, you know, a friend of yours or somebody says, oh, my heart is a bit thick, my heart muscle's a bit big, right? That's what this is. So this on your left is a good pump, it's squeezing very nicely, and on your right is a poor pump. For all the athletes in the FAS who are running on the national team, we actually do one of these scans as well, to make sure there are no congenital problems. If you go to the UK or you go to Italy, Spain, all the academy players are screened as well. All the athletes are screened this way. It's a quick scan, it's an ultrasound. And then we can look to see if there are abnormalities with the valves. This shows one of the valves on the left, but it doesn't move. Okay, it's okay. And this one on the right is supposed to show a leaky valve. If you look at the left once again, that's a normal carotid neck artery with blood flow going through. And the one on the right is the one with a block. Can you see it? Can everyone see that? The flow is down to a little trickle. This is actually one of my patients. We stented her neck arteries some years ago. Okay? And then we do many other things. You can check your tummy, look for fatty liver, because that's also a sign of cholesterol depositing elsewhere. So what can be done if more investigation is needed? We have state-of-the-art technology. I mentioned the CT scans. We have a 640 slice CT scan in Parkway. It's 1 second is like a photo that you take, and you can see all the blocks in the heart arteries with 90% accuracy. Okay? What you see here is a normal artery at the bottom. That's what the CT scan looks like. And if you compare the left and the right, okay, you can see a normal artery with good blood flow through it. What you see is blood flowing through the pipe. Now, what you see there is restriction of that blood and not being able to flow through the pipe. Can you see that up on the top? Does everyone see that? Once again, if I could point, it'd be a bit easier, but I forgot this is going to be a TV. So you see that where that arrow is, that's where blood doesn't flow through. If you get something like that, we fix it, balloon stent. And then we get beautiful three-dimensional pictures like this. And everyone's always asking me as well, so I always put the slide up about radiation. Ah, but it's a lot of radiation, doctor, you know? Excuse me. If you look at this chart, the CT scanner with the low dose is down here, okay? That's very little radiation. Very little radiation when you use the right equipment. The amount of radiation you get from doing a CT scan is equivalent to you living on Earth for 3 months. You get that amount times 3 every year living on Earth. It is the difference between living here in Singapore and living in a couple of cities in other neighboring Asian countries with a bit more pollution I don't want to name names, okay? That is the difference in doing a CT scan, okay? In some of the bigger countries with a lot of pollution. Okay, so don't worry, don't worry. Compared to all these other tests and everything else, the amount of radiation is really low. I get 10 times that almost every day doing balloons and stents, because we work under those environments with radiation. Okay? And then we have other things that can detect heart rhythm abnormalities. You know, in the old days, you had these big things you had to wear like Batman utility belts to look and see if your heart rhythm was abnormal. We can detect things with sexy little devices like this, which are tiny, fit under your clothes, and even like that. Okay, so technology's moved on. Not every hospital has it, but we use equipment like this. Okay, and remember that African player, the African origin player who collapsed, a 17-year-old. He basically had an abnormal heart rhythm, and his rhythm could have been detected with something like this. And then if you got high blood pressure, you don't need to wear a big blood pressure cuff. You can use cool little devices like this. I know the watch isn't very pretty, but you wear something like this, and you can monitor your blood pressure. You can't buy this, by the way. This is only in medical centers and clinics. Okay, because this thing costs about $10,000. And then, of course, this is from a talk that we gave in Indonesia. Then, of course, you've got to assess for things such as sleep apnea, where you have blockage of the airway going down. Okay, and we do that with a little device like this that you wear at home and monitor to see if you stop breathing. Okay, and if you did, and you had an abnormal result, oh, it's not there, the slide. There's a little mask you can wear with oxygen. Okay, so lots and lots of devices that we can use. We have special perfusion scan devices to look and see if the blood flow through the arteries is good enough. So I'm going to flip past some of these, okay? You get beautiful pictures. So we have all this kind of technology, and some of it's a bit complicated, okay? But we live in a great day and age where we can use all this stuff. And if you need to then, and you have a block, 80% of heart attacks, 80% of problems with the heart arise from blockages of the heart arteries. Then someone like me fixes it for you. Okay, this is how we dress. And this is how we do what we call an angiogram. Has everyone heard of angiograms before? Where you pass a catheter up. You've all heard about this, where you pass a catheter up the leg. Nowadays, like for mine, 99% of them we do it from the arm. The patient can walk the same day. And in a lot of other hospitals as well, we do start doing that. You pass the catheter up, this way, or up there, and inject dye. Okay? So this is a normal artery, where you pump dye inside and have a look. Can you see that's a nice C sign? And this is someone with a block. Can you see that? Then we fix it. Pass a wire down, pass a balloon, put a stent. Okay? So there's several options when you have blocks. Medication, balloon and stent, and sometimes bypass surgery. But I have to tell you the truth. This whole year I've not sent one patient for bypass because technology's moved on so well. Last year maybe one. And the only reason is if the guy's going to need 10, 12 stents, okay, it's cheaper for him to do bypass surgery in general. Okay? And that's because most people as well don't want to go in for surgery. So when I say you do angioplasty, ballooning and stenting, we just pass a little wire up your arm and balloon and stent, and it's called a procedure, it's not surgery. So this is how we do balloon and stent. We pass a catheter up the arm, this way, and then at the end of it, all you have is a small little dot like this. Okay, so I'm going to move back, and let's see if this plays. There should be a catheter coming up. No, it doesn't. Okay. So what we do is we pass a balloon down, squeeze the blockage to the side, and then you put a stent, balloon it first, like that, then put a stent inside, and remove the balloon. That's what ballooning and stenting is. Okay, and what's left behind is a little stent like that. 100% block on the right, balloon, not on the left, balloon on the right, pop it open, and then because there's a recoil going in, we leave a stent behind in there to keep it open. Okay? And then we have lots of other equipment to measure pressure across to see which stents, which arteries require stents. And I'm just going to move past these very quickly. We have ways of looking inside, this is inside the artery, ways of looking inside the artery to see what the cholesterol path looks like. This is an older technology, but the newest ones actually use light rays, the one on the extreme right, which you see over there. So the reason is a comparison of a CT scan, a normal angiogram, and the current one, the Mona Lisa, that's very clear in color. And we can see the inside of the artery. This is a recent course that we held in Mount Elizabeth, teaching a lot of the doctors how to use this. So let me just show you. I won't show you, that's us doing procedures, you don't have to see it. You can see the inside of the artery and what's lying inside. It's like putting a camera on the inside. With a view like this. So we have so much technology that can improve how we put stents in and improve the outcome of the ballooning and stenting, down to the fact that less than 1% of our patients ever have a problem if you use the right technology. Okay? And this is actually a stent on the inside of the artery, and several years later, using a different color type of technology, it heals fully. So we can see things like this. Okay? And I'm just going to show you something quite cool. We can actually see the inside of the artery. Can you see that? That's the stents. The stent against the wall, this thing running here, and the one on the right is like that camera going through. I'm sure none of you have seen pictures like this before. So we've been teaching a lot of the other doctors, even in Mount Elizabeth, how to use this new technology, which is now only available, and fixing the artery to almost get a perfect result. Can you see that? These are the stents. You're videoing that. Cool. Okay? I'll just flip past it. This is one of my patients where they couldn't do bypass surgery. It was mentioned by the doctors I saw before that they couldn't even balloon and stent it. We managed to open it all up, fix it, from 2013 to 2014 with special stents and using this kind of technology to open up the artery for it. Can you see what's on the left? It's almost blocked off. There's no flow going down there. It's 100% blocked. We managed to fix it. Okay, so we have this kind of technology. And then if we want to check them again, what we can do is do a CT scan. You don't need to keep doing angiograms or passing the catheter up. You can do a CT scan several years later and look and see what's wrong. Okay? I'm going to flip past this as well and show you that once again, this is what we have. Okay? As opposed to bypass surgery, and bypass surgery doesn't remove the old block. You put a new artery on top to bypass the block. Can you see that on the right? Can everyone see that? An artery coming down and bypassing whatever block there is. This tells you what bypass surgery does. And of course it's a scar. Not all patients have blockage in the heart artery, some have valve disease. I'm just going to flip past a few of these very quickly where the valves of the arteries have got problems, okay? Because there's too many slides. And just to show you, one of our patients, okay, so sorry, this is Dad and me once again. One of our patients, marathon runner, 39 years old, had a problem with a valve that was leaking. Continued to run, didn't want to have surgery. And the reason I can put this up is actually this guy is the founder of, there's a group in Indonesia called the Indo Runners. I think they've got a few 100,000 members. So he came to see me and we fixed his valve for him. And he had a big press conference afterwards in Indonesia showing people that you could go back to running once your valve had been fixed. So I showed you where the valves were, which are chambers from one, they're actually a doorway from one chamber to another. Many people who are younger, it's an issue with the valves. The valves are torn, the valves are leaking. You can even fix those with minimally invasive procedures. So this is a seminar that we held in Indonesia after that. And if you can see here, I just wanted to show you, this was the size of his heart on the left and after surgery on the right. So his heart had swelled up because his valve was abnormal. That thing in the center there is the heart. What you see there is the lungs and the ribs. Is that clear? So we got him back to normal and he's running as before. I also want to show you this one. This guy is 80 years old now. He's running marathons. 7 half marathons after angioplasty. In 2015, he was about 75. He's almost 80 now. Okay? He continues to run marathons. He's got 7 stents in his arteries. So there is still hope. Okay? So once again, just to recap, cause of heart attack, try to prevent it. If you're going to do some runs and things like that, make sure you've got the checks, especially if you're above 40 years of age. Okay, that's when your risk starts to go up a lot more. Even for the 30-something-year-olds, it's a good idea. Okay? Health screening early, medication if you need it, learn CPR, I mentioned all this earlier on. Okay? So remember all this. Thank you.
When you're doing a full marathon, kilometers. Now, what are the signs, symptoms that should tell you that you should not push further because mentally you must continue? So in order to avoid towards the end, feel giddy and then relax.
So this is actually not an easy question to answer, because what we advocate and what a runner wants to do are often two different things. You want to beat your last best time. You want to make sure you finish your marathon. But if you are running, and this is not an easy thing for anyone to do, if you are running and you find yourself completely out of breath and pushing yourself to the limit, and you're not even able to complete a few sentences as you speak, you're pushing yourself too hard. Then you need to slow down. So if you're hitting the end and you know you've hit a wall, by right you should slow down to complete it. And the older you are, the more important this is as well. When you're a young guy in your early 20s and you're trying to beat a marathon record, or you're like Mock, who's going to give you a talk later on, you know, and he's trying to beat his best record, compete at the Olympics and everything else, it's slightly different because they're trained athletes. But for someone, I would say, let's say your age, if you're going to do a marathon, your body's going to tell you straight away if you can't really push yourself. If you're getting chest tightness, you definitely should not be going. You'll know that straight away. If you're unable to speak a few words in a sentence, you push yourself too far. If you've not been hydrating yourself, then you're at risk, okay? If you have hydrated yourself and followed the right things, taken the electrolytes and everything else, and you want to make sure that you don't faint after you reach the end, you need to have a little bit of reserve after the finishing line to continue walking around and cooling down. Because if you stop suddenly, what happens is the blood pressure just drops because the blood pools in your leg. So these are things you need to look out for. It's very difficult to tell you that this is the sign that you should not push yourself beyond. By right, you should have trained yourself to a point where you can recognize it before you run a marathon. I hope that answers your question.
What is athlete's heart, and whether overtraining in running or other sports can actually damage your heart?
So I'm standing in front of a group of runners here, I think. Some are runners, some may not be. His question was, what is athlete's heart? Can exercise or overtraining damage your heart? Exercise or overtraining can definitely damage your heart. If you've read the newspapers and there have been BBC reports and CNN and everything else, extreme sports, okay, training yourself to the limit causes scar tissue in the heart when you push yourself. You get like micro little heart attacks sometimes in some areas. So by right, we're not supposed to train ourselves to that point. It's very difficult to tell a runner not to do that. If you remember the story, do you know where the word marathon comes from? There's an old Greek mythology or legend that a guy ran back to Athens to inform the Greeks that the Persians had arrived, and he ran that prerequisite distance of 42 kilometers. That's where the 42 kilometers of the marathon comes from. And he ran from a place called Marathon to come back. His name was Phidippides. He pushed himself to the limit. He got there, so the Persians had arrived, and then he collapsed and died. Okay? So the first marathon runner, if you will, actually collapsed and died. And that's because he pushed himself to the limit. I don't know if you remember this. Some of you may have read this. His name is Phidippides. Look it up. Okay? What he did was probably caused himself a heart attack. He probably didn't drink water, didn't follow all the rules. Okay? And if you continue to do this and push yourself, ultra-marathon runners actually cause a lot of scar tissue in their heart arteries. It predisposes them to getting heart rhythm abnormalities, because what you do is you break the electrical circuit in the heart, so their risk goes up. So overtraining damages you. So therefore you have to step it up to a point and not push beyond. So we generally tend not to advise people to do ultra-marathons. That's why I say it's difficult giving this talk in front of everybody else. But if you train yourself really hard, what happens is, remember I told you the example of the blood pressure pushing against the heart doing weights, and then the muscle getting bigger. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. An athlete's heart is that heart muscle being trained to such a point that it thickens and becomes bigger, and then it becomes inefficient. So there are quite a few people who've got this thing called athlete's heart, and it hits a point where the heart muscle becomes inefficient. We see this a lot in bodybuilders as well, okay? And they're also sometimes taking steroids and everything else. The whole thing swells up so much, you actually tell them to stop training and decondition it to make the muscle small. So bigger isn't always better. And that's what the athlete's heart story tells you. But if you've got an athlete's heart where it's not so big and you found a way to compensate for it, then it's okay. So some people have ultrasound scans of their heart, the heart muscle is thickened, the doctor tells you, don't worry about it, yours is athlete's heart, but it hasn't gone to a point where it's going to cause you damage, you can continue. But if it has, we often tell the patient to stop training and decondition themselves to some degree. And it's a bit of a gray area, because athlete's heart, the thickening of the heart muscle, sometimes is confused with the thickening of the heart muscle that comes from an abnormality of the heart muscle as well. So it's a bit of a gray area, and you need someone experienced like a cardiologist to be able to tell the difference between the two with certain tests. That was a complicated question. I didn't expect such a medical question. Okay. Are there any other questions anybody wants to ask?
You have to share the mic.
If you're monitoring your heart rate while you're running, how good is that as an indicator to let you know that you should be using, or you read stuff like you should be at this much percentage of maximum heart rate and stuff like that. So if you're around that rate, area most of the time, is there a this much time that you can go at that rate before you yourself? I mean, how good is that as an indicator?
So everybody's body is different. Some people have a
lower resting heart rate, some people have a higher resting heart rate. What you're referring to is a very well-known formula called the Carvonen formula, where it's 220. Everybody knows this, right? Everyone's nodding their heads. Okay, 220 minus your age. So if you're 40 years of age, you get a 180, and you're supposed to be targeting a percentage of that when you train, and slowly build up to it. People tell you that when you're exercising, you should be at somewhere like between 60 to 75%, okay? And that's your number. But it's kind of difficult, because if you're a very well-trained athlete, your base heart rate's very low, you'll be running marathons not even near that. There's some other people who, no matter what, their resting heart rate's a bit higher, they actually train at a much higher heart rate. So how good is it? It's not the best, but it's probably the best we have, and the simplest method that you can use to monitor your heart rate. So if you run at about 60% and you are fit, okay, of that level, you can continue at that level, or 70%. And that's why your body has to speak to you, and you have to speak to your body, and you have to communicate. Your body will tell you, if you've been training properly, what this is like. Where this becomes a problem is when we have what we call weekend warriors. Okay, the guys who just train at the weekend or decide to go and run a marathon having never trained for it. And then when you start monitoring your heart rate, you'll find that it's bounding at a very high level. That is actually dangerous for you as well. So the key to this is training, monitoring that heart rate, maintaining that level, whichever you've decided based on the calculations, and then seeing that you can continue with it. So if you've been training yourself for a while for the marathon, you'll know what heart rate beyond which you can't really push yourself, and then you go with it. But if you can't, monitoring your heart rate is a good second way of doing it. It's the best we have, but it's not the best evidence base. There's actually been quite a few articles that have debunked the whole Carvonen formula theory of late. So, you know, as always in medicine, there's always two sides to every story. But it's good enough for them. I hope that answers your question.
Assuming you've done everything, screening and practice and everything, what is your advice for medical therapy for every person? At what age do you need to stop running a full marathon?
So, if you came, okay, so now this is medical legal. Okay, this is quite tough for me. So generally, a lot of my patients, okay, I tell them that they shouldn't be running a full marathon beyond the age of 70. Okay, I tell them that. They do it anyway. It's against medical advice, and then when they tell me they're going to do it anyway, then I try and walk them through it and help them to manage that marathon. I've got at least 5 patients with between 4 to 8 stents in their heart arteries who are still running marathons. And if you follow medical guidelines, we are supposed to advise them not to run marathons. They do anyway. So when I've done the disclaimer bit, and they agree that they're going to take the risk themselves, then we try and walk them through it. We tell them not to push themselves too hard, and most of the time we advise them not to. If you've done all your medical checks, it depends on what type of medical checks you've done. You know, people tell me, oh, I've done all my checks, I'm okay. What check have you done? ECG, blood test. That doesn't tell you anything. If you've had a CT scan, let's say, and it shows that your heart artery blocks are 0 at the age of 70, okay? And then you're able to go and run, then your risk is lower. But you must remember that a CT scan is 85 to 90% accurate, and it depends on who reads the scan. So if someone were to come to me and tell me, my CT scan is okay, I'd like to see the pictures myself before I advise the patient. But let's assume you're 70 years of age, your CT scan is super clean, and I've never seen one CT scan in a 70-year-old that's super clean, okay? I can't remember ever having, no. One lady who was almost 80, but she's a lady by the way, okay? Super clean. And I was convinced that you don't have any issues. I tell you, you could go ahead. Because then, you're a 70-year-old whose actual body age is maybe like a 50-year-old. And then that rule applies to you. You understand what I mean? By the same token, we have 50-year-olds who are in really bad shape, you know, and 30-year-olds are 70-year-olds are better off than them. Yeah, so I can't tell you when you should stop and when you shouldn't, but generally, if you're older, you should not be doing it. And then if you really want to, we have a side chat. Yes?
Sorry, I can't move very well. I realized I broke my leg.
I'm currently in the middle of training for my half marathon for Standard Chartered. I train both day and night time, but I realize daytime I feel a little bit of breathlessness on my chest. I'm not so sure whether that's normal or what could be done to prevent this kind of symptoms.
As with everything else, we'd have to examine you first. I would assume you're in your 20s. Okay? Alright? So if you're in your 20s, the likelihood being a female, okay, or should we say teens? 20s. The likelihood of you having a problem related to your heart is going to be very low. Unless you have a congenital issue. So let's assume that we've checked and you've got no heart artery problems, no congenital issues. Then we have to figure out why you're getting breathless. Is it because you're unfit? And we'd assume that you're not because you're training very hard, but it could be. Are there other things? Could it be a lung-related issue? Many patients don't realize they've got asthma. Okay, the first sign is a little bit of breathlessness when you race, when you run. You're running outside, in the outdoors, you're exposed to pollen, you're exposed to grass. So what we would do is we do a lung function test and figure out if it is due to borderline asthma, low-grade asthma, pollen hypersensitivity, dust hypersensitivity. There's a whole load of things it could be, because you don't get it at night. At night you're alright. There's some people who don't react so well to heat. Some people who can run. You know, people like yourself who come from where? Where? Germany. Ah, okay. Ich spreche nur ein bisschen Deutsch auch. Okay, I also speak a bit of German, I was just telling you now. Okay, but in Germany, okay, it's slightly different. They when they run in the summertime, there's a lot of pollen going out there. That's when they get breathless. Okay, but they're also not used to our weather when they run, so they sweat a lot. They can't manage it during the day, but they can manage it during the night. I assume that you are Singaporean, so we have to look into the root cause. How can you ensure that doesn't happen? You get the right checks done, because something is not right if you're getting breathless during the day. Now, on the other hand, if you're able to train past it and compensate it, stand charts at the end of the year anyway, right? So you got a little bit more time. Yeah. So if you're able to compensate for it with your training, then maybe it was a matter of fitness more than anything else, because you expend more energy during the daytime when the weather is hot. So I hope that answers your question too.
Maybe we'll take one more. Anyone else? Take advantage of Dr. Lolly's here. If not, Doctor will be here for a little bit longer. I mean, you can just catch him, just for informal chat. We'll break for about 5 minutes before the next speaker. But in the meantime, like I said, you can have a quick chat with Doctor, or the good people from Mount Elizabeth Hospitals will be having a booth. If you do want to think you have this thing that you want to check out in your chest, or you do want to just have a quick scan, the good people at Mount Elizabeth Hospital can put you in touch with the doctors and their team. So we'll have a short break, and then the toilet's just behind if you do need to get rid of the 100 plus and all that to replenish later. Some of you will be going on the run, so you may want to not have too much liquid in your body. But we'll start again in about 5 minutes, okay? Thank you.